want to do is go round the room and sort of get an idea of your journey to leadership. But starting with you, Zara.
So my journey to leadership started when I was very young. I would say it started when I was in school and I was captain in the netball team. As I developed through high school, I became extremely competitive. And then at a young age, I was given an opportunity working for an ultra high net worth who encouraged me to grow as an individual, to lead within his businesses. I think I was extremely lucky to be given this opportunity. Being the personality that I have, I've just gone from strength to strength and obviously found myself to be extremely lucky working for Tiger and being given another opportunity to lead and to develop within the UAE. So that's how I've sort of gone within my journey. How about yours, Ange?
Not too dissimilar to yours, but I feel like it just happened quite organically. I don't think I ever, in any role that I've been in, thought, oh, I want to move into management or lead a leadership position. It just happened.
See, mine was probably like before recruitment days. I worked for a company. My manager went on maternity leave and I stepped in to cover her role and then she didn't come back. So I stayed on in that position. That was a very male-dominated industry and it was incredibly tough for me as pretty much like the only female leader across the company. I moved into recruitment and just sort of thought, I just want to recruit. Management's not for me. However, sort of fell into the management role just from being the go-to person for everyone else and sort of being the person that could sort of support others around me as well.
Mine was very unplanned. So again, I think quite a natural progression. When I first started working, it was outside of recruitment, but I'd become like a team leader and I started managing small amounts of people and then that just grew. And as I went into recruitment and I wasn't managing for quite some time, but then when I did, I kind of went down that exact same path. It wasn't planned. It was just something that happened through my experience. And I guess the ability to take on those responsibilities and do this type of role.
I think a lot of the time that happens when I think you naturally develop, confidence and maturity in your career to, originally that was never the path that was set out, but you just naturally fall into it. And certainly when you've got teams around you that without even realizing, they're asking you the questions, they're coming to you. And I think, in some ways, it's you're more of a natural, aren't you?
One of my first roles in recruitment, I used to work next to a guy who very specifically knew the exact path he wanted his career to take, and he knew what age he wanted to be the manager, then the director. And I just remember thinking, like, how can you know what you want to do when you don't know what all those options are? And didn't want to put myself on a path when there might be something else that is more suitable for you. And I think you have to grow into yourself and learn along the way that those are the roles, all the responsibilities, all the qualities that you would have that can take you down that route.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess with that then, Jane, what do you think are the characteristics that make a good leader?
I think there's obviously a number of characteristics and there's never one thing. There's certainly elements that all good leaders will have, whether it's something like vision. Someone needs to be able to see what the end goal is got to be and to have all of those qualities that then take people through to that. So things like communication are absolutely key, making sure that you're bringing people on board, always being as honest as possible, collaborating with your team. You need to be able to inspire and motivate, but you're not going to do any of those things without good communication and without that vision at the end. So I think those are like the real key things for me.
Yeah, I think it's also about understanding that each person on your team is different. So there might be a little bit down because their performance isn't as good. It's just about sort of being perceptive as well and communicating clearly.
Yeah, and I think what ties in with that as well is also just being open-minded to hearing ideas and not just believing that everything that you think is the right way. I think coincide with that, just someone that is also, respectful. And I've always, thought it's important just to treat how you want to be treated. And I think that goes a long way as well.
I was going to say, I think also like leading by example. Now, obviously, within our positions, we are still actively recruiting. So setting that example to our team and delivering, I think that is equally as important. for people then to respect you and to look up to you, knowing that you have delivered on these aspects.
Yeah, it's sort of like you can't be a manager sort of do as I say, not as I do. You kind of have to show that you've got the same expectations for yourself as you do for your team too.
Yeah, having high expectations of yourself and pushing yourself to deliver will also encourage others to do the same.
Nice. And Jane, what would you say the biggest learning curve was in your journey to leadership?
I think at the beginning of my leadership roles, I think the thing that I learned most was not to let your own emotions make decisions. You can't keep emotion out of things, and you never should, because that's what makes us human, and those are the elements that really bring who we are together. But at the same time, you have to use those emotions appropriately and use the facts. And I remember so clearly one of the very first decisions I made in a leadership role was made based on too much decision, and the kind of what came from that was such a huge learning curve for me, because I still remember it, and I still remember how I felt afterwards. Which I suppose are the two things, aren't they? The first thing is, don't let emotions make the decisions all the time. Remember the facts, but also by making mistakes, that's where you start to learn as well.
Again, like working in a male-dominated industry, when I started my leadership career, it was sort of thinking that I had to do the same thing that I was seeing from others. And it probably just took a while for me to kind of find my own management style. There were certain sort of characteristics that I saw of the male leaders around me, and it was really about sort of understanding, like, I didn't have to be the loudest, whatever it was just sort of finding what worked for me and what worked for my team.
Yeah. And I think, it wasn't my direct journey into leadership, but something that was certainly visible, I think, as I was growing in my career was, I very quickly realized that, not everybody in any role that you're in has everybody's best interest with whatever it is that they're doing or what they're trying to achieve. I think from the back of that, very quickly, just followed my gut if there was anything that I was looking to make a decision on, because I think whilst, yes, it's not necessarily about following the emotional side of things and focusing on the facts, when you're dealing with people quite often as well, sometimes that is the best thing to do. Not always, but certainly something that I think even to this day now I look back and I think, I went with my gut on several things and it was the right thing to do, even though, maybe on paper it may not have been.
Yeah. And I think there is something to be said for sometimes if it's a difficult decision to make, it's probably not the right decision. And that does come from just trusting your gut and going with your instincts.
Yeah.
It's also about knowing how you may do something a particular way and think it's a great way, but not everyone else wants to get on board and do it your way. So it's also being able to adapt to other people's needs and how, I don't know, maybe learning. Some people learn practically and some people don't. So it's just all of these things that I think also can become quite challenging in trying to get the best out of your staff.
It's very much, I think, where, like, certainly what I've learned is that, with the skills we have, I think, within our roles of learning how to persuade and negotiate, and I think appeal to, the team as an example with an idea and how we can get them on board. But at the same time, like you referred to, Zara, leading by example and showing them that, yes, this is the best idea and this is why, and you're actually following through yourself.
And what do you think some of the biggest challenges are faced as women in leadership roles, Angela?
One that is pretty obvious is, anyone having to take time out to go on maternity leave and taking time away from a business. Quite often, when they do return, whether that's after 4 or 5 months or a year, they may not be given the same opportunity or come back to the same opportunity that they left. And I think also businesses can change so quickly. What they had left at that point, the people even that they'd worked with, can all change. That for me is one that nowadays, if I look back compared to, over a decade ago when I went on my first maternity leave, we're far more looked after. Obviously it does depend on the company and the culture, but as a rule, I think, companies are offering far better maternity packages to try and retain and, you know, bring their staff back, but also paternity as well, you know, which I think there wasn't available years and years ago. That's probably, for me, just as personal experience, one of the key ones.
I think we see that from our clients as well now, with even women returning to work after maternity leave. And, you know, there will be more flexibility around having different start and finish times to accommodate, you know, pick up and drop offs. There'll be, you know, even like phasing people back in, so that they might start off doing 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, and more job shares. Like, it wasn't something that we really saw, like, you know, like years ago.
Yeah, and I do hear more and more when recruiting and, you know, coming across more, you know, women in leadership roles, that I think with the hybrid working, with all of these contributing factors now, it's allowing them to take these roles, because they can fulfill them without physically, you know, having to, let's say, be present in an office 24/7, which I think previously had always been the expectation. And, you know, if they were then to put family life maybe to one side, because otherwise they weren't going to be able to move forward with their career. It is a big learning curve for anybody. But I think a lot of it comes down to the company that you're working for, and how they treat and value their employees.
Is it hard to go back?
No, I felt like it's like riding a bike, straight back.
How do you think the landscape for women in leadership has changed over the years, Bex?
I guess if you're thinking about that landscape for women, if I think about like my generation, like my mother and my grandmother, you know, they probably didn't have jobs. Like they were homemakers and they raised the kids, and you know, that was sort of what they did. But I think now, if you look at sort of, you know, all the younger generation of candidates coming onto the market, like they've all grown up with two-income earners, and that, you know, they've got mothers that are in roles that, you know, are their sort of career positions and something to aspire to. So I think we've seen a change in that. Like, I spoke a little bit about, you know, the difficulties I found in working with, you know, male-dominated industries where you felt like you had to sort of manage a certain way. And I think that's perhaps been like a bit of a perception. And again, something we see a lot with candidates coming through for PA roles. Like, we used to hear so often, like, candidates come through and say, I won't support a woman. I just won't support a woman. And I think there's sort of been that difference now where women have realised, like, you know, there are differences between like men and women in leadership roles. We can embrace those differences. And it's more of a culture now of women supporting women and sort of lifting each other up. Like, there are some really interesting stats that you can look at as well around, you know, just even like the number of C-suite women in C-suite roles. And if you go back to, you know, 2015, that number's increased from 17% up to 28%. So even something like that shows, you know, a huge difference. I think, you know, it's good to see now that there are companies that are encouraging more women into leadership roles. So it's definitely moving in the right direction. I don't know, Zara, how does that compare to what you see in the MENA region, which I'm sure is quite different?
So Saudi, one of the big projects, had just appointed their first female CEO, which is a big step for them, and it's a positive step as well. In Dubai, we see lots of female leaders, and they will be celebrated on Women's Day. And it's great to see so many of them have moved to the Middle East, had a vision, a goal, and come and achieve that, and inspire other women within this region to let them know that they can do the same and it is achievable.
I think one of the things that we see a lot more as well is the amount of women mentors, or having that access to mentors. And that's huge, isn't it? Because if you're talking about 17% of women in C-suite roles moving now to 28%, that's so many more women who are seeing it from their perspective, or are able to put into place how they think, how they feel, what they think is best within a business, and they're providing that mentorship and leadership to everybody, as well as the young women coming into the business that they're looking up to, but everybody. So you're getting much better access. Women aren't, maybe in some areas that they're still kind of carving the way through, but there's a lot more already that have gone ahead that are making it easier for us as we come through.
And we even see that in our, like, when we're doing our salary surveys and things, and you're looking at the reasons why people want to leave roles, like, there are so many women that it's about their career now, and it's about progression, and it's about moving into leadership roles. Like, they want to see that advancement for themselves.
How can organisations create more of like an inclusive environment, do you think, to support that development of female leaders, Bex?
I think there's so much more that we're seeing at the moment. So I guess, it goes back to even for sort of graduate roles, like, there are so many organisations that are actively trying to bring females into sort of more dominated industries, whether it's finance, tech, areas like that. We see it with the improved benefits for parental leave as well. And now, especially with support for women that are, at the next phase of their life and going through menopause as well, like, initiatives like that can make a big difference. Jane, you've seen some stuff as well, haven't you, around organisations with, how they're looking at sort of shortlists for and inclusion of women and more females in shortlists?
Yeah, particularly in areas around STEM, so kind of technical, scientific type of roles. A couple of clients that I've worked with in the past limit the number of CVs we could put forward, but if we put forward a female within that shortlist, we could add an extra CV, just to kind of keep encouraging and making sure that we're trying to find that bigger pool of candidates that might not always be the obvious places, and that's really encouraging.
Yeah, the gender pay gap reporting is a really positive thing as well. And, seeing some companies will, obviously it's not compulsory for every company to participate in like UK gender pay gap reporting, but there are more companies that are voluntarily putting forward that information as well, which I think is an amazing step as well. I even saw some really interesting stats from a McKinsey workplace report that was produced last year around like the number of women coming into leadership roles. And again, the figures there was sort of something like, for every 100 men promoted from entry level through to management roles, 87 women were promoted.
What sorts of initiatives or strategies do you believe are crucial for achieving that sort of gender parity in leadership and in attracting women to leadership roles, Angela?
It needs to start at the foundation, with the hiring at potentially the more junior level roles, and then offering and allowing for those promotions to move within organisations, or giving them the first opportunity in the first instance to be able to elevate their career potentially elsewhere. I think a lot of that would involve even job descriptions and how they're written, because I've read somewhere, I think, that when women read a job description, they make sure that they meet every single requirement pretty much, whereas a man wouldn't. And so things like that are also really important. And I guess organisations offering and making everybody aware of whether there's societies that people can be more aware of to know what's available to them.
Yeah, again, I'm sure it's totally different in MENA. Zara, is there anything that you've seen out there?
Kind of a different market, really. When we advertise roles or see roles advertised, I never see it gender related, but on some occasions there can be adverts that say nationality, gender, age, any sort of these requirements. So it depends on the organisation, but there are things like this still happening. It's becoming less, but it's still there, and it's very apparent.
I was going to say, do you think that a lot of the companies actually are planning to put a strategy in place, or is it really just see how it plays out?
People are trying to be more diverse with their hiring, and I feel that there is becoming a balance, but I feel that we are behind and it will take time.
We had a round table here last August, and that was all about inclusivity in STEM. And one of the things that one of the participants was telling us that they've introduced into their company is when they're hiring, they have a hiring just maybe like 2 or 3 additional people in their hiring team, and they can literally be from any part of the business, from any background, doing anything. And it just meant that all roles were being considered by not just a management team or not just a typical kind of traditional management team, but everybody was being viewed very much independently in quite a different way. And they said that had really kind of opened their eyes to how thought processes can change and how being more inclusive, that has enabled more inclusivity, because it has just made everybody aware that they really are looking just for the skill set, the right kind of fit within that particular role, and taking out all of those kind of traditional, this role should be filled typically by this kind of person, or that role should be filled typically by another kind of person. And that was very interesting.
I think as well, like, again, years ago it was pretty normal, like, or it wasn't normal, but people felt like it was acceptable to ask the question on, like, are you planning on having a family, or are you married, or those sorts of things. But like, I definitely think we've seen, like, now that's like a massive no-no, and it's just not doesn't even come into the equation in the recruitment process, which is, even just something like that is a massive step forward.
What sort of advice would you give to women who are aspiring to be a leader eventually, would you say, Zara?
So for me, I would say that have confidence in what you believe in within your goals. Don't be hesitant to take risks. I think risks really do pay off. And I think just go for it. Just don't hold back. There isn't a thing as failure. Some people see it as failure, but I think it gives you growth. And I think that's important for development. Don't hold back, assess a goal, and take on a challenge. What would you say, Angela?
Probably just believe in yourself. I mean, if it's not something that you're directly even thinking, this is the path I want to take, but anything that you're doing, like in your daily actions, whether it's home, work, whatever it may be, it's just maybe stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit and trying new things, but believing that you can do it. And I think, confidence plays a huge part in that, but if you don't try, you'll never know.
For me, I think it's about finding a really good female mentor and someone that you can look up to and ask questions when you need advice and, when you need help, and educating yourself, like just kind of reading the right books and just, finding ideas and inspiration from, like, other people's stories and the books around you.
One of the things I would say, though, about to say to young women who are at the beginning of their careers is, don't be discouraged. I think it's very easy for other people to tell you maybe how you should feel or what you should be doing or what kind of box you fit into. And I don't think that exists anywhere near as much now as it has done in the past. But I still think it's very easy to hear other people's voices when actually just stick with what you believe in yourself.